don't know. Every time I hear someone talk about their disability, I just think of that IT Cred episode.
Don't use the disabled.
What? Why not?
You're not disabled. You'll get in trouble. It's illegal.
I don't think so.
Hello? Hello? You all right now? Do you need help?
I'm disabled.
Sounds disoriented.
Move back
What are you doing?
Don't panic!
from the door.
What? No!
So, what happened?
I'm disabled.
How?
How what?
How are you disabled?
Leg disabled.
Oh, wait, do you have a wheelchair?
Yes.
Where?
Stolen.
And the scene of him being lifted down from a bus very slowly in his wheelchair, looking so humiliated and embarrassed and like feeble, attempting to look feeble. It's the best. That is what being disabled is.
Would you like to know more?
Hello, Malcolm. It's so exciting to be speaking with you today because we are both disabled, but we're not disabled the way you would think. That is to say, we don't identify with it. A lot of people have asked us to talk about this because they too have various diagnoses and they
Well,
want
what you said is stop being retarded about being retarded.
that's the problem. Yes, people are being way too retarded about being disabled, and I think that we should talk about the right way to
Well, because
do
they're
disability.
engaging with, in our society, teaches them to engage with disability in a way that is really, really destructive. And where this came up in one of our episodes is I was reading about Gavin Newsom. And Gavin Newsom had this sob story about how difficult it was to grow up with dyslexia.
No.
And when I was reading it, I was like, his learning disability and everything like that. It just sort of occurred to me. And it hasn't occurred to me in maybe half a decade that I have dyslexia.
And then that prompted people to say, okay, well, I have dyslexia and I struggle with it. How did you overcome it? And someone else wanted to know, well, because you called it a learning inconvenience, not a learning disability. And they're like, well,
Yeah,
what's the difference between a learning inconvenience and a learning disability?
Like literally, Simone, and you can back this up. When was the last time you think I have mentioned having dyslexia to you or anyone before that episode?
And I think you'd mentioned having it like once or twice. Like it was only one of those things of like, it didn't matter to you and it didn't affect your life. And yet, we have good friends who've gone to like disability camps for dyslexia.
Literally the only time, and Simone is diagnosed with autism, right? So again, like this is something, the only time I remember it mattering in my entire life was trying to remember the difference between a B and a D, which I severely struggled with. But other than that, it was completely irrelevant throughout the rest of my life.
I think that your mispronunciations are a result of your dyslexia.
Yeah, I was diagnosed by psychologists about this. And one of the reasons why, when somebody's like, what's the difference between a learning inconvenience and a learning disability? I suppose as somebody who has a plethora of both, it's how much it actually ended up impacting my life. The one that hit me the most growing up, by far the most, much more than likely Simone's autism, or I would think even, like having one arm or something like that, is I have dysgraphia, which means I cannot handwrite. So I cannot, and Simone made jokes about this when we were dating and stuff like that. I'd come home and I'd give her a writing or something, and she'd go over and she'd be like, Malcolm, like, what was it? You thought that I had like tutored a...
Yeah, so Malcolm comes home and he leaves on the table this like drawing and a little bit of writing. And it's like this like stick figure of a man and drawing that like literally looks like a first grader did it. If I can find, I think I took a photo of it. If I can find it, I've got to put it up. And I put it on the fridge and I was like, oh man, like at the Stanford Business School, they must have done some kind of big brother, little brother like thing, where they brought in kids and you talked with them about business. And then you're like, oh, you put that on the fridge. And I'm like, yeah, like who are you working with? And you're like, I did that.
Yeah, and so I am going back to when you first learned to write in school. I had to use something, and only people who like have disabilities would know about this, called an alpha smart.
Never heard of this.
So they don't want you to be able to use spell check or any computer augmented things to help you write, but because you can't handwrite, they need to give you something to write with. And so it's a simple computer that can only write strings of text. And then you plug it into
So it's like a
other computers.
typewriter. It's basically a typewriter, but digital.
It's like a digital typewriter, yeah.
Okay.
And so that's what I would use for everything in classes and everything like that.
Oh.
And I was also incredibly slow at writing as well, which also really, and this is the other thing, like
That's so crazy because you've written 5 books.
there are things that didn't impact me as much as the reason I call dyslexia learning inconvenience is there is just random genetic variation that impacted me dramatically more. Like, for example, I am terrible at languages. I took Spanish because I grew up in Texas, right? I lived in Spanish speaking countries at times as a kid. And because I live in Texas, you take Spanish every year from kindergarten. I didn't pass Spanish 1. That is your first year of Spanish until my junior to senior year in high school. That meant I failed Spanish every single year of my formal education.
No, you're like literally a language retard. Like literally.
I'm
You are
literally
retarded.
language retarded.
Yeah.
Now, who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Timmy.
Timmy!
No, it wasn't you, Timmy. Try again. Timmy, did you not do your homework?
Mr. Garrison, haven't you figured it out? Timmy's retarded.
Don't call people names, Stanley.
Now, that is not something I am diagnosed with. That impacted me dramatically more than dyslexia. Another
But
thing
that's the thing. And like a big point here, though, is that the definition of disability has much more to do with what makes you non-compliant or non-functional in some way within a typical environment. And because your typical environment doesn't involve you needing to be bilingual, that in itself doesn't come up as a disability.
I actually disagree with this very strongly.
Really?
I was about to mention the second thing that has impacted me way
Okay.
more than dyslexia. The second thing that's impacted me way more than dyslexia is that I am a very slow writer and a sort of processor of information, thinker
Yeah.
more broadly. I just think very slowly. And what this means is that in class, I couldn't take notes. So what I'd always do is for every single class that I did in college, I recorded it on a recorder. Then I went back to my room and I played it in slow speed and typed it out. And then I went over that and memorized that. The amount of now this is something everybody has to do, and it wasn't due to any recognized disability.
No, I disagree, because in college, one of the ways that I made money, and this was the school paid me to do this, was there were students who had exactly the same problem, and I took notes for them.
I know the school offered that to me, but I didn't.
Then it's clearly a recognized disability, and it is because we live in a fast-paced world that this was not.
Well,
I think it is
it's not a
slower-paced.
diagnosed disability, So the point here is it's not a diagnosed disability. And the point is also with your autism. It's not even just disabilities, because your autism is clearly like a labeled disability, but it has pretty much only helped you in life, outside of maybe not picking up on social cues and almost getting raped or something because of that. But I think outside of not knowing how to flirt, but knowing how to flirt with the type of
Having
guys
terrible
you actually
game.
wanted. Anyway, I'll let you continue from here, but I wanted to go on that sort of side tangent because that's what brought all this up. And I think that in our society, we have these words for like specific, like ADD or something like that. ADD is not a learning disability. ADD is not an important part of who you are as a person. It is going to impact your daily life less than random genetic variations in terms of how you learn or your happiness set point or it's almost like people think because we have named specific random genetic variations that really aren't that particularly impactful in an individual's daily life, that we now need to elevate them to like a part of your identity, because we ripped out everything else about people's identity. We say, oh, you can't identify with your birth culture, you can't identify with your parents, you can't identify with your ethnicity. And so if you can't identify with anything, any of your history,
the last, along with being gay or whatever, bi, it's the last form of white pride.
And your disabilities are. That's all you are at this point. And this is really psychologically harmful because then you lean into this stuff.
Yeah, and I'm going to argue that actually identifying with ADHD is incredibly damaging, because I don't think you've watched a lot of ADHD influencers, and seeing the extent to which their identification with the disorder makes them really non-functional. It is insane.
I know how I'm handling ADD with my kids, and I'll put the South Park.
Hello, I'm Dr. Richard Shea, here to tell you about my exciting new drug-free treatment for children with attention deficit disorder.
Well, we had to
Sit down and study! Sit down and study! Stop crying and do your schoolwork!
Yes, exactly that. But I'm first gonna push back on your argument that disabilities aren't really just a declaration of societal norms and what you need in order to be functional in mainstream society. Because you have to consider what was considered a disability in even recent history, like same-sex attraction, which was classified as a mental disorder in 1952 and only removed as such in 1973. You know what else was considered a disability, which I have? Left-handedness. That was a disability.
Really?
Yes, it was. Okay. Also, PMS, which was also known as hysteria or neurasthenia. Oh, right. Masturbation. Everyone's favorite thing to do online. That was a disability.
What?
It was a symptom of nervous diseases and insanity in 19th and early 20th century. Yeah. So also, guess what? Shyness, introversion. That was formally described as neurasthenia as well. So I guess they just grouped it with PMS.
Okay.
And social neurosis or inadequate personality disorder. Inadequate personality. You have an inadequate personality
disorder?
Shyness, Malcolm. Shyness. Because being shy in history made you non-compliant with the rest of society. And now you can be functional and shy at the same time, given the way our economy and school and everything else is set up. But yeah, it was absolutely seen as a disorder. Also, grief, although I'm kind of with them on this, they called it pathological grief. It was once considered that like any grief lasting longer than like a few weeks or months was a disorder. I'm with them on that. Yeah. But like, yeah, they were like, dude, you're too sad. Something's wrong with you. Like, get over it. Smile.
I wish we could have grief as a disorder. So
bring
I
it
think
back.
Bring it back. Bring back grief. Yeah.
Yeah. But now the way that disabilities are diagnosed is also really weird and different. And what seems to have been the catalyst for this change was the Americans with Disabilities Act in the United States, at least in the 1990s. And then the ADA Amendments Act in 2008, which is just an expansion of that, which basically expanded the definition to include invisible disabilities, like learning disabilities, mental health disorders, chronic conditions. So like PTSD or bipolar disorder or anxiety or depression. These things weren't really seen as disorders in the past that would get you special privileges, and now often they are. But I still think that
we diagnose menstruation as a disability. Like,
I mean, yeah, if you look even back, like further, when it's like, well, let's remove you from, you go to the menstruation hut.
Go to the menstruation. They had those, by the way. That was like a common thing.
Yes. I mean, and some women even today, I think, wish it were classified as a disability. I mean, you see it like in school. There's the girls who are like, I'm on my period, and they think that means they get to like do nothing.
Like,
girl, that ain't
okay.
how
Okay. No, I agree that disabilities change over time, right? Based on social norms. I'm actually wondering now, what sort of correlates with the disabilities today? Because like you wouldn't say like grief, but then people can be like, well, depression, right? Like,
yeah.
You wouldn't say like, it's weird to me actually that ADD is considered a disability today.
Yeah.
Because it seems like such a trivial thing.
But it isn't, because typically where this shows up, when people are in institutional environments is like both in jobs and in school, you are supposed to sit down, sit still, and do a job and not switch around a billion times. Like you have to do the job and finish the job and then do the next job and finish the next job. And people with ADD or ADHD struggle to do that. Therefore, they're non-compliant with today's society. I mean, here's one way you can look at it. You had heard someone describe autism as like most people are just normal cars. They can just drive on normal roads, and autistic people are like NASCAR cars or like really like fine-tuned race cars. And like on any normal like environment, they're going to break down constantly. They do not work on normal roads. You cannot drive them off road, but like on very specific types of tracks, they are amazing. And I really feel like that's apt, not just with autism, but with any sort of mental disorder in general. It's really more a description of the road. And I think that in some environments, for example, like Okay, so, introversion was seen as a disability for a while, but I think that in some environments, introversion is like the most adaptive thing. Like if you're like on a spaceship traveling in a highly isolated environment for years on end, introversion's
That's true of autism in a modern context. So the form of
100%.
autism that Simone has is very similar to what we were talking about there. And she needs very controlled environments to be productive. But when she is productive, she's much more productive than other people. And she can work much longer hours than other people and work straight much longer hours. By the way, one of the reasons when people are like, Malcolm, you talk a lot of terrible stuff about ADD. I was diagnosed with ADD. That's why I'm like, this is of all of the disabilities that I have, by far the most trivial, growing up. So I don't take it seriously. I'm trying to think of other things. I was diagnosed with bipolar. That one I don't believe I ever had.
I think that was made up. Yeah.
But I was diagnosed with it at one point. I think that was because my mom was bipolar. So from a bipolar person's perspective, my mood was constantly varying, but my actual mood wasn't constantly varying. It was hers that was varying. So when she reported her subjective experience of my mood to psychotherapists, they thought, oh, it's him. Because you've lived with me. Do I have fluctuating moods?
No, you don't.
No. Okay.
No, I mean, I think that like someone who has not encountered you before might guess that you are manic.
Yeah.
But like you're only just always by their definition.
That's called hypomania, by the way, to be always a little manic. It's like hypomania is slightly below true mania, but there's a form of, I forgot, where you're just like only hypomanic.
But who wouldn't want that? That's perfect.
Yeah, who wouldn't want that?
This is why people buy cocaine, all right? Like this is why people get addicted to meth.
No, but I think that this is why I was diagnosed with ADD, right? Like I'm very excitable. I'm very like try to work all the time. And
no, but like ADD, you can't focus, and like you do concerted focused work.
I focus on things that I like, which is what most ADD people are. Like
that's true. School, yeah, your ADD. Yeah, that's so true. And like, well, so Scott Alexander had talked about this because he has diagnosed and treated a lot of people with ADD, and he helps them. They get their ADD medications that they want. And he pointed out, and I can't find the original blog post, but it's just like, hey, maybe sitting in front of a computer in an office doing work that you personally find meaningless, like isn't something we were evolved to deal with in the first place. Like our definition of this as a disorder is, again, a reflection of our society.
ADD was useful to me only insofar as, and this is where I do think it is useful as a categorization at all in getting rid of it.
That is where we get to the not retarded part of dealing with disability is, okay, a disability is basically, okay, the way your car doesn't work on these roads. And sometimes you need to know that your car doesn't work on these roads, because if you're stuck on these roads, you're going to need modifications. You have to buy different tires. And so, yes, it is important to do that, but only so you can drive on those roads long enough to get to a kind of road where you can drive well. Like that's the point of this. This is how you do the non-retarded disability approach. And this is the way to do it. But first, let's go into the ways to not do it. And I'm going to start with self-diagnosis. So can you, because everyone's doing this now, can you guess the accuracy of most like online self-diagnoses?
I'm going to guess 20%.
Pretty good. It's 19 to 38%. There's some things that you can more accurately diagnose online than others, but it's 19 to 38%.
Oh, you know what you should pull up, by the way? That, and I'll talk on this subject while you do. There's a graph of the percentage of young people that identify primarily as a disability. And they went through different age ranges. Try to pull that one up. And on the self-diagnosis thing, one of the problems with self-diagnosis is when particular diagnoses get trendy, like everyone just opts into them. And the reality is that you can, if you lean into it, present whatever you want. For example, there was a period, and this is well studied in psychological literature, where people famous who had Tourette's. Oh, by the way, that's another one that I have.
Oh, yes, you do have Tourette's. Oh, Taco Lantern.
So people don't even, because I'm fairly good at controlling it. So only if you were like a family member of mine would you know.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't lean into it. Like, why would you lean into something like this?
No, the sweetest way that you do, like you used to say stuff with like Tourette's that would get you in trouble, like which is the common version of it, right? Like people saying stuff. Like I recently saw someone who knows if they really had it post online of like them having Tourette's in an airport TSA line saying, I have a gun, pew, I have a gun, pew, and like just keep saying that in the TSA line. Like that's classic Tourette's. And you had some things that you used to like say when you were stressed that would have made people concerned.
Yes.
But guess what he says now when he has moments? He says, I love my wife. He's how do you do that? That is like that is the most romantic, wholesome disability IQ.
Well, I tried
I've ever
really
seen.
hard to redirect the neural pattern because it's a neural pattern that's like all of a sudden I describe it as it's sort of like there are tire tracks in your head, you know, like tire tracks through mud that like the more times you drive through it, the car gets pulled into it.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what's happening with Tourette's is when you sort of are in certain periods of anxiety or lose self-control, it's pulled down to specific neural pathways. And if you exercise control over them for long enough, I can sort of force it down a new pathway. It doesn't work every time, but it works enough. And by the way, the thing that causes it for me, for people who don't know, it's extended periods of social interaction.
100%.
And then it happens afterwards.
100%.
Because I over process what's happening in those moments. And what's funny here is I even have the rare but cartoonish type of Tourette's where you say offensive things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but I don't know if it's regular Tourette's because it doesn't appear like the phrases are slightly longer than they would be with normal Tourette's.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes like there was one sentence series. My favorite, if you don't mind me saying, was taco lanterns. Sometimes
taco lanterns. That's what I was trying to redirect to anything that wasn't offensive.
Yeah, that came on later, and I tried so hard on Etsy to find a lantern that was a taco because I really wanted a taco lantern so bad.
But it was funny here is like I am coming at this, and like a lot of the watchers of our show, they're like, wait. He has dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADD. He at one point was diagnosed with bipolar. He has Tourette's. He didn't even think of that as like something to mention. Like one of the reasons why
I forgot
disabilities with such disdain is I will see people build their entire persona around a disability that I consider trivial because I have so many.
You gotta catch them all.
Gotta catch them all. Did you find that chart, by the way?
I found a bunch of charts. I don't think they're exactly the ones that you want. I'll send them to you real quick on WhatsApp so you can tell me if I found it. There's a lot that show rates of both being LGBTQ and having these disabilities. So that's maybe what we're thinking about. I found one that's a table that show that 45% of youth identify as having a disability. But I wanted to touch on your Tourette's thing because that's, I think, a really good example of sort of self-diagnosis having a negative effect. But I also first want to point out that, so first, okay, 19 to 38% of self-diagnoses, like if someone's like, oh, I self-diagnosed with autism, they are, if you flip a coin, I mean, like the odds are they're wrong. Okay. The odds are they are incorrect with their diagnosis, but research nevertheless indicates that people who self-diagnose are more likely to report high levels of psychological distress and impairment, similar to those with a formal diagnosis. So even though they're more likely than not to not actually have the condition they think they have, they are still just as likely as someone with the condition to experience the adverse effects of that condition. So self-diagnosis can result in increased anxiety and a sense of stuckness or self-fulfilling beliefs, even when the diagnosis is not later validated or supported through clinical care. So like, this is just so damaging. And it's really important that people understand too, that like just perceiving something can be more damaging than actually having it. And there's a sleep study example that I like to cite with this because it's so apt. There's research that shows that people who perceive themselves as poor sleepers, despite objective evidence from sleep labs, where they like can actually tell if you're asleep, like better than your Oura ring or your Fitbit or whatever, that their sleep is fairly normal. If they believe they're poor sleepers, they can experience more adverse effects than those who report good sleep, but who actually sleep poorly. Like in the sleep labs, they're like, damn, like this guy's not sleeping very well at all, but they feel fine because they don't see themselves as poor sleepers. So like identifying as someone who has a condition can be really, really damaging. I mean, this specific phenomenon is known as sleep state misperception or paradoxal insomnia, but it's such a thing. It's such a thing. And I found that it totally exists. Like during the newborn days where like I don't sleep much at all, right? If I act like it's normal and like, oh, well, you know what, human bodies have evolved to deal with this, like, because they have, like we're fine. I don't really experience problems.
Yeah, I'd also note here as a side here where people could be like, how could somebody have so many comorbid disabilities? This is actually
how can someone be so retarded?
Right. Yeah, no, this is actually very common if you actually have mental disabilities to generally have a collection of them. Because if one thing's broken, it's usually there's a cascade and a lot of things are broken.
Yeah.
And anyone
you've got brain wiggles. It's just
looks at the way that I think through things, they can tell that it is very
your brain is wiggly.
Lateral or sort of orthogonal, orthogonal to the way that a normal human think through things, which is one of the reasons why, like the core reason I think I perform so well within the intellectual market is because I am both relatively intelligent, though not super intelligent. Like I've been in environments, I got my MBA at Stanford. I've been around like the actual smartest people on earth, and they're much smarter than I am. But I mean, I still was in like the top quarter of my class, but
I don't know how many were smarter than you actually, but
there were some that were smarter than me that I could just.
There are a lot who have a lot of like raw intellectual power, like they can crunch numbers and do math in their heads and stuff, and you don't do that. But I mean, the point you're making though is that the mere fact that you have a wiggly brain, that you think orthogonally, and that like, of course, in the real world, in mainstream society, this makes you non-compliant with like normal test taking and normal school. It still gives you a huge advantage, and people who identify with their mental disabilities are just choosing
how do you utilize this to get ahead? Is you just and because maybe I grew up with it and I was always in like the most disabled of the disabled group, I always really, and I never identified that way. I never saw it as particularly important to who I was. I was like, it may give me access to Ritalin, which is what, amphetamines for tests. Who doesn't want that?
I know, right?
It may give me access to being able to do everything on a computer. But I just saw that as cool. And it's so weird that like as a disability, it's completely disappeared. Like dysgraphia has not been relevant to me as an adult since my first job when they wanted me to address letters.
I bet Octavian has it. I'm pretty sure Octavian has it.
I mean, our kids might not even ever learn that they have it if they don't have to handwrite.
I mean,
like,
they
might have to for like AI tests. So I guess we'll see how that goes.
It's showing up in his work. It's cool. I look at his work every day. So that's, and I also have like those learn how to write books with him. And like, even though there are grooves in the paper, he's like, but I mean,
the point I'm making is just take inventory of, be aware of, if you are different in some way that can be diagnosed, there are many advantages to that.
100%.
For example,
want me to go over some of them? I think there's actually more than you probably know.
Yeah, go.
So yeah, one, early diagnosis actually, I just want to say, like, is really important, and formal diagnosis. And that's what Malcolm got. And it made a big difference that we're doing that with our kids, because studies, like a lot of really consistent research has shown that children, for example, diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder or other developmental disabilities at a younger age tend to experience less impairment in cognitive, social, and adaptive functioning than those diagnosed later in life. So the sooner the better. One study found that toddlers diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder between 25 and 41 months were more severely impaired across multiple domains than those diagnosed earlier. So like, we're even talking really young. 25 months is pretty young. So like, the earlier, the better. And then early intervention and support during critical neurodevelopmental windows is linked to better outcomes. So one, like, it actually does make a difference with some things. And in terms of the benefits you get, we're going to talk about the US because it would be too complicated for us to go country by country for the benefits you get. And also so many countries have like, state medicine that this doesn't matter the same way. But in the USA, where healthcare is insanely expensive, children with physical, intellectual, or developmental disabilities, including serious mental health disorders, can qualify for Medicaid, which is basically state healthcare, like nationalized healthcare, even if their family income would otherwise exceed typical thresholds, because typically Medicaid is only for people at or below the poverty level. So, for example, 2 of our sons are diagnosed with autism, and when we were told that, we were told like, well, this means that, if you are formally diagnosed with your kids, they will be given supplementary insurance from the state that will pay for ABA therapy that would not be covered by your insurance, which is huge because we can't afford that. I just learned
a lot of
though.
autistic people are total retards about ABA therapy, and they get all defensive about it. And it's like, it's teaching you to mask. Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, Simone's autistic, right? Like, you would say you need to know how to mask. You don't get to make the world live. And this is the other thing. I don't go out in the world and say, you need to live by my rules, right?
100%.
I'm going to find a way to change myself so that I can work within your systems.
Yeah.
Right. You know,
You have to acknowledge that, like, unless you have the privilege of living a totally isolated life, you are going to need to know how to, like, go to the DMV and get something, or possibly navigate a university or an office. I mean, this is becoming increasingly irrelevant, which is why we're less and less worried about autism as a trait, and we actually think it's advantageous, because we kind of, in a techno-feudal world, people aren't going to need to all work at a big office and like mask so much. But
hold on.
ABA
One
is
thing that people are gonna
necessary.
push back on here is they're going to be talking about autism. And they're gonna be like, well, some people with autism are like severely disabled, and we're like, we're not talking about them, right?
You're
Like,
not. No.
but like people who are actually mentally disabled, first of all, a few things here. I don't think it's particularly worse to be disabled because of some named disability outside of just being incredibly stupid, which does count you as a disability if you're below a certain IQ level. But really, that can just be random genetic variation, right?
Yeah.
If you lack the intelligence to compete within the system as it exists, you lack the intelligence to compete within the system that exists.
Yeah.
And there's very little the system can do to get around that.
Yeah, really sucks. Yeah, there's not a whole lot that can be done in that case. I mean, it's more about communities and governments finding a place or a way to help those people still live productive and happy and fulfilling lives. But back to this state supplemented healthcare. I learned recently, because I thought this only applied to ABA therapy.
Yeah.
No, we can just use that as supplementary insurance and have it pay for anything our employer-based insurance doesn't cover, which is basically nothing, because we have a family level deductible. This is the amount that you pay out of pocket before your insurance kicks in, of $16,000, which we can't afford. So there have been many times where, like, we haven't taken our kids to the emergency room because we're like, well, we can't afford it. Like, we will never financially recover from this. And now we can at least take our boys to the emergency room because insurance will cover it. And it's because they're autistic, even though it hasn't, like, you know, them falling and bleeding profusely has nothing to do with them being on. I mean, maybe it does.
I mean, maybe.
Maybe. But that's incredible. So, like, I think I know actually of many parents who know that their children are autistic, but they haven't got them diagnosed because they're like, well, I don't want my son.
No, they're like, I can't afford it. It's like, bro, if it gets you free Medicare.
That is one factor. Yeah. Getting diagnosed can take a really long time because wait lists in the US are very long for diagnosis, and it is expensive. It can cost like $500 to
I mean,
more.
do you remember what I had to do to get them diagnosed? I booked at like a place in like a really rural area, like 2.5 hours away from us.
It took us a long time to drive there.
I constantly was looking for new practices. It was a new practice in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and it cost a lot of money. So it is difficult. But the bigger reason I hear from parents who like signaled that they didn't do this was they didn't want their children to grow up with the stigma. Like, they didn't want.
You know, it's so funny that you mention this when it's the exact antithesis of the way that I was raised.
I know exactly.
My parents always let me know about all the diagnoses I had. So they clearly let me know about all of these. What they did not do is I was not allowed when I took a state IQ test or state, you know, the tests that would like rank you and stuff like that.
Yeah.
My parents had a strict policy of never letting me see my score.
So you were never allowed to see how like successful you were, only how like
only where I was failing. Yeah, because they didn't want me to like
go to your
be
head.
one of those people who like grows up thinking that, I guess, I mean, it wasn't a secret to me. I was put in the gifted program and everything. Like, clearly, I was scoring near the top. I wasn't like they should have thought, okay, if he's scoring near the top, he knows the reason we're hiding this is because he's.
Your mom was onto something there, though, because research has shown that telling kids that they're very smart can lead them to take fewer challenges on because they identify as being smart, and any chance where maybe they don't come out on top or get the answer right is a risk to their identity, and that is too scary and threatening for them. So instead, parents are encouraged to say things like,
Here's
you
a
tried so hard, you worked
funny
so
thing
hard.
that my parents did back then.
Yeah.
So they'd have me do like testing, right? Like standardized testing. And obviously I do the testing that the other kids would do.
Yeah.
But I'd also do college level testing.
We need to do that with our kids.
I'd go into like college level testing things, and I'd be the one little kid in this giant room of like high schoolers.
We should totally do that.
I always remember, I mean, I didn't do spectacularly on those back then. I remember I'd come in, because those I was allowed to see. I'd come in like 80%.
Amazing.
But I mean, still, it's, you know, when you're in middle school, that's pretty good.
That's very impressive. Yeah, 100%. But anyway, so like, don't be retarded about your kids and not get them diagnosed because of stigma, because depending on how you contextualize it, there won't be any. It can be an advantage to them. And you can get, and because it's hard to get good healthcare in the United States, like that is an amazing benefit. And as long as that exists, and, you know, it varies by state, but still. Another thing you can get is if your child qualifies for that kind of subsidized healthcare, they also qualify for what's called ABLE accounts, which are their tax advantaged accounts. So if you just in a normal account in the United States invest money like for your kids, you're going to be taxed on the income that money makes, like the dividends. ABLE accounts don't tax the dividends. So your kid basically gets more money when you save it for them. Those accounts are supposed to.
By the way, is a statistic that came from a piece called "More Workers Consider Themselves Neurodivergent."
Okay.
So 53% of Gen Z employees identify as neurodivergent.
Of course they do.
11,
You know,
only 11% had received an official diagnosis.
Of course.
86% of 100 hiring managers told them that they viewed neurodivergent disclosures as having either a positive or neutral impact on an application. They are more, I mean, they're basically signaling that they're in the urban monoculture.
Yeah, I'm educated and therefore, and like self-aware, and therefore I'm a better hire. What's interesting is the person who invented this concept of neurodivergence was only referring basically to Asperger's, and she hates the fact that it has now just been used as this like broad umbrella term. Like she does not consent. She hates it.
Does not consent.
Yes. But then also when we've touched on these other benefits that that you can get extra time and extra accommodations on exams, as you had the typing thing and you had the extra time. So 100%, like you can get in, you even got to go to different exam rooms. Like to not.
Oh yeah, I got to do private exam rooms because I needed a computer.
An extra time, because like for me that was a big stressor. It's like Jimmy over here is mouth breathing, and the clock.
I'm here in a private room on amphetamines with additional time
with a keyboard. Because I also remember my hands cramping, the pencil going dull. Like, I mean, come on, it's like, why wouldn't you want to give your kid that benefit? There are even things like special needs trusts for kids with qualifying disabilities. There are educational plans. Like our son who's in kindergarten has all these additional teachers who come give him special attention. You know, so like we're in these like large public school classrooms, but then he has like his minder who gives him extra attention, and like he gets to go off here and
funny that you remember this. I just remembered as well. So another disability I had growing up.
Oh, no.
I had to go to separate classes for speech therapy.
Oh, I forgot about speech therapy.
Yeah, I had a lisp, so I had to go to speech therapy. So I would go to I also, for a period, was in the disabled class.
You were not.
My mom was so mad because I was there with the actual retards.
Actual retards.
And she got so mad at me for getting put in that class. And I was like, I don't know, like this is where I am. So then I go from there to the gifted program.
Well, and that's so like if she were a parent of you today, she would call you 2E, aka twice exceptional.
God, I hate that.
I know it's so cringe. It's so that's okay. We're gonna put that in the retarded category of disability, twice exceptional. But I want to go back actually just to the damage you can do by contextualizing your disability as a bad thing, because context is important. So we're like, yes, get your kid diagnosed. Yes, get yourself diagnosed. Yes, get accommodations. Yes, absolutely play the system, but don't view it as an actual thing that cripples you. Because I can't emphasize enough, like people don't talk about this enough, the nocebo effect, just how powerful it is. So there's a lot of evidence that suggests the nocebo effect, which is basically like, so the placebo effect is where someone tells you something's going to help and it helps you. even if it's like whatever, like the pill they give you is totally inert. The nocebo effect is the opposite. If they're like, oh, this cream is gonna make your skin burn, and it does, even though it's just like water or lotion, right? So experimental research demonstrates that nocebo effects, the impact of negative expectations, are consistently stronger and more persistent than placebo effects. So healthy volunteers induced with negative expectations, in one example, rated their pain much higher over multiple sessions, with this amplification lasting at least a week, almost double the impact seen with placebo suggestions. The nocebo effect it's actually strong enough to cause real and serious medical conditions and side effects, to require hospital care, or even contribute to fatalities. So people have literally died from the nocebo effect.
Wait, explain this.
People, because they believe they have these problems, they start to experience real symptoms. We talked about this a lot in our Spoonies episode. Spoonies being people who self-diagnose with very difficult to diagnose and largely invisible illnesses. And the argument that we try to make is
will react to that.
Yeah, because a lot of people are like, oh, Spoonies, they don't actually feel anything. No, they feel something. They're suffering. They have very, very serious problems. Like they are in pain. They cannot move. They cannot get up. Like everything that they say they're experiencing because of the nocebo effect, they're actually experiencing. And here's the problem is, okay, so let's say, you self-diagnose. You're with some kind of disability. You probably don't have it. Like 19 to 38% of the self-diagnoses are correct. The rest are not. But you are still going to experience all the problems. And the problem is that a lot of people just now have chosen to identify with their disabilities in a lot of different ways. And you pointed out the Tourette's incident. This is, for those who are not familiar with it, in 2020 to 2021, clinicians and medical researchers noticed a surge in teenagers, and especially adolescent girls. What's going on there? Started presenting these onset of tic-like behaviors after extensive viewing of TikTok and YouTube influencers who either claim to have Tourette syndrome or display similar symptoms. And all these studies started documenting that many teens develop not only comparable tics, so how most people with Tourette's have their own thing, but these people all have the same thing and very specific vocalizations and movements that directly mimicked those of popular social media influencers, like basically Tourette's influencers. So very, very rare things. And many that weren't even really symptomatic of Tourette's. So it was someone faking Tourette's on social media, causing other people to fake the same kind of fake Tourette's. But then I'm surely also experiencing true adverse effects per the nocebo effect. So they describe this phenomenon as mass sociogenic illness being spread, which it used to just be physical proximity, right? Like those villages who dance themselves to death, right? But now it spreads on social media, so it's a much bigger issue. And similar patterns have been noticed with other conditions. A lot of people are identifying with ADHD, with autism, with dissociative identity disorder, and that's really bad. It's really bad. And there are even renegade versions of people who are very clearly actually disabled, but and who are trying to push back against, I guess you could say, disability pedestalization, who are still getting it wrong. So I had brought up to Cripple Punk, and it's much older. It's not a 2020s thing. It was started actually by a specific Tumblrina called Tyler Trewella. Basically, it started with just one post. Trewella posted a selfie with a cane and a lit cigarette and labeled it Cripple Punk, and just added, "I'm starting a movement." And a movement was started. And it's all about Cripple Punk is about directly abandoning the hang in there kitten inspirational poster version of crippled people, where people post videos of adults with Down syndrome and are like, what an inspiration, what a blessing. And it's I am not your mascot. I am not your inspiration. And it's this idea that disabled people exist for themselves. It's about being proud of who they are. But the problem is that I think as much as Cripple Punk kind of moves in a good direction of I'm taking ownership, I'm not embarrassed about what I am, they don't take it a step further and say, and here's my advantage of being a cripple.
Well, I think, with a lot of this stuff, it's the way you should actually be. They're like, how should you actually be related to it? Then just don't fucking relate to it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's look,
If you don't see it as a
at the end of the
superpower,
day,
don't relate to it at all.
whatever disability you have, right, it is irrelevant usually when contrasted with other genetic traits that you can't identify it with. So for example, right, you know, suppose you can't use your legs or something like this. Would you trade 5 points, 10 points of IQ for your legs back? Like, nobody would. Nobody would. At the end of the day, it's just intelligence. Except for maybe somebody who's already very stupid. But at the end of the day, it's all just intelligence, right? Like, no matter how much you have sort of standing in your way, at the end of the day, it's all intelligence combined with agenticness, combined with work ethic, combined with an ability to think outside the box.
Yeah, like resourcefulness. I mean, really, like having a disability is about being aware of where you deviate from societal norms or like the mainstream way people handle things, and learning how to adapt to those environments, like through, you know, special testing or medication or whatever it may be. And then also learning how to create and benefit from friendly environments, like environments in which your unique configuration of car thrives. And that's it. Like, don't identify with it otherwise. Don't get a fake internet diagnosis, get a formal diagnosis if you really need one, to get the medications, to get the special accommodations you need. And only use your differences to achieve more, not less. Like this idea of allowing a disability to give you an external locus of control where you blame everything on your disability is the worst. If you approach it only with an internal locus of control, like, okay, how am I going to use this to my advantage? Fine. But yeah, I think that basically sums it up. I mean, you and I have adapted to our disabilities by just creating weird schedules, mostly online lives, social isolation. Like we work from home, we don't go out much, and we live life according to our unique needs and our kids' unique needs. So like we don't all sit down together around a table to eat dinner. Everyone eats in the way that like will maximize the amount of nutrition they need to get, which means that our kids are running wild or like in another room or whatever, like, and they all get their own thing. It's like different food for everyone, but that's what it takes. And that's not the societal norm. It's super not okay by most people's standards, but like it works for us. So yeah, just build the environment that works for you and get the tools you need to navigate the hostile environments. Get your spacesuit.
Yeah. Well, just, I mean, we used to understand this. There is a difference between the, you know, disabled person. And it's so interesting that this has been sort of taken out of media. The disabled person who was like exceptional in spite of their disability, which was definitely a thing in like 80s media and stuff like that.
What, like Stephen Hawking or something?
Well, yeah, we're thinking
Rain Man?
I think like X-Men or whatever.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
But then there was the disabled person who was just figured it out. It was like everyone else. Here, I'm thinking like we were actually watching because I didn't even remember that they had a guy in a wheelchair on the Incredible Ghostbusters cartoon. I'm like, oh my god, that's so mid 90s. Whatever happened to people in wheelchairs in shows?
And I also just don't see people in wheelchairs anymore. But like I remember, growing up as a kid in the 90s, like every show as their diversity thing had someone in a wheelchair. Like, who was that?
And they always played basketball. Whatever reason, people
they did
love playing basketball. I know very little about being in a wheelchair, but I know it makes you great at basketball.
Yeah. No, what is that? Oh my god, it's such a thing.
I don't know. One person saw it, and then like all the TV execs are like, "Where's the basketball scene?"
Yeah,
he's in a wheelchair, right? You got to show that he's like cool at a. No, but the point being is, if you were blind back then or whatever, you just figured it the F out, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you didn't make it into this big effing thing. But now people with these trivial disabilities are making it into this giant thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, you guys have you have the dirt on us now. You got dirt, maybe some practical advice for those of you dyslexics who watch the show. Hope you found this useful.
Yeah, I love you to death, Simone. Well, I hope that people stop freaking. I suppose every time you go out there and you talk about your disability or your hard childhood, know that there's a decent chance that the person you're talking to has that plus like 10 others. And it is secretly thinking, oh my God, this person is such a buffoon. If that's what they tripped on, rock one of 30 rocks that flew at my face. Yeah. I'm like, what a fucking fool.
I'm disabled. I love you, Malcolm.
Love you too.
2 recording sessions next week.
Okay.
Okay. Let me. Oh, you've already recorded. By the way, it looks amazing. And people really enjoyed the episode today. They also loved the sliders reference.
The sliders reference, they were like, oh,
Sliders
you
reference.
remember sliders. Well, today's episode was one of, I think, my favorites. I think it's up there in terms of our theories with the one civilization hypothesis.
At
The
least one other
multiple
commentator said this was their favorite episode.
Yeah. So one person said that.
Yeah, one. And a lot of other people said they loved it. I'm just sending you screenshots of comments that I took.
Oh, so you know how to lighten my heart. People saying nice things about us.
And there's one random accidental screenshot of Binance not letting businesses connect.
But you like the picture of RFAB before?
It looks great. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about it. Like you wouldn't even know I'm so excited about it. It looks good. Did you generate the images too?
Yeah, I generated the images. I got them in the backend asset folder. I connected them. I did all the coding.
Look at
Vibe
you.
coding is awesome. And we're going to add that to our Patreon paid stuff for anybody who wants to learn about how to do like vibe coding and other things like that. Because I find it's weird how, inaccessible a lot of this information is when it's so important to surviving in the modern world. But like, I don't know how to code and I just picked it up and I can do it now. I can code.
Yeah, that's so cool.
That's insane.
Well, and it's not just, see, I thought it would just sort of do it all for you without you knowing really what's going on in the background. But what you're actually doing is it's helping you learn the actual underpinnings of it, which is so cool.
Yeah.
That you're doing more stuff manually now than I expected at all. It's really awesome. Yeah, just so FYI for those listening, we have paid only Patreon, VIP, Substack. Also, if you're paid on Substack, you get these episodes 2 on the weekends. We're trying to keep that up, which may be tough given our schedules going forward, but we're going to, so far we've kept an unbroken streak. We're going to try to keep going. So if you want more, you can get more. You just have to pay for it. Okay, here I go. Okay.
So instead of showing you guys a picture of our kids today, I'm going to show you a picture of one of my old honeymoons with Simone because they showed up in Google Photos memories. But it also shows just how weird living with somebody who has like autism like her can be. What you'll notice is that she's doing in this is she is observing the exact category of food she's about to eat. Then she is looking up that food in her apps. Then she is putting that food on a portable scale she brought with her so that she can calculate all of her numbers.
It's a pavlova. All right. How to do this? I think I'm just going to grab it. Oh my gosh. This is going to be more difficult than I thought.